Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the most incredible stories in all of sports, the fairy tale journey of a boy who overcame absolutely impossible odds to become a king. Those words, they still give you chills, right? The legendary commentator Peter Drury just perfectly captured the moment a lifelong quest reached its storybook ending. But this is so much more than just a story about football. So, that was the final, glorious chapter. But to really truly understand the legend of Lionel Messi, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning. All right, so our story starts in Rosario, Argentina. It's a city that just lives and breathes football. And it's where we meet this quiet little kid who had one person, just one, fighting his corner from day one. It was his grandmother, Celia. She was his first and biggest believer. You know, the coaches were worried he was just too small, too fragile to play. But she'd be on the sidelines, yelling at them, "Put the little one on, give him the ball." Her belief is what started this whole journey. And to this very day, every single time he scores, he points to the sky for her.
And get this, it tells you everything about the boy he was. At 13, when the football world was already starting to whisper his name, his dream wasn't about fame or money. He just wanted to be a PE teacher. But, well, fate and a really scary diagnosis had something very, very different in store for him.
Right when his talent was becoming something you just couldn't ignore, the entire dream was almost completely shattered.
So at just 11 years old, doctors told him he had a growth hormone deficiency. The treatment he needed involved daily, expensive injections that his family and his local club, they just couldn't afford it. So they took this massive, massive gamble. They flew all the way across the Atlantic for one single trial. And this is where the personal cost just becomes immense. The whole family tried to make a life in Barcelona, but it was just too much, too hard. They had to split up. So imagine this, you're 14 years old, you're in a foreign country with your dad, and you're carrying the weight of your entire family's future on your small shoulders. So he'd crossed an ocean, he'd made it to a new continent, and this is where the legend of Messi truly begins, with what might be the most famous contract in the history of sports. The club's director, a guy named Carlos Rexach, was so completely blown away by this little 13-year-old that he knew he could not let him leave. He grabbed the only thing he could find, a paper napkin, and he signed him right there on the spot. An official contract. On a napkin. Incredible. So he gets into Barcelona's legendary youth academy, La Masia, which is notoriously tough. Other players targeted him because of his size, but his new teammates, guys who would become stars themselves, they saw his genius and they protected him. And once he hit the senior team, his talent just exploded. He was an absolute phenomenon. I mean, just think about this. At the time, Ronaldinho was the biggest star in the world. He wins the Ballon d'Or, the award for the best player on the planet, and he says this. He basically admitted, I'm not even the best player on my own team. That's how special Messi was, right from the start. He'd conquered the club world, but how? What was his secret? Well, the answer is kind of hidden in the data. Okay, so we all know Messi scores a ton of goals. That's obvious. But when you look at the advanced analytics, they reveal a truth that is even more mind-blowing. So to really get it, we need to quickly talk about a metric called expected goals, or XG. All it is a system that looks at thousands and thousands of shots from the past to figure out the probability of any new shot becoming a goal. So by comparing how many goals a player actually scores to their XG, we can pretty much objectively measure just how good they are at finishing. Now, what's so fascinating about this chart is it compares Messi to all these different types of players. Let's just look at that top right box. That represents the absolute elite standard, a top-tier attacker who shoots a lot. The model says a player like that should score about 274 goals. But in reality, during that same period, Messi scored 375. He doesn't just beat expectations, he shatters them. So yeah, he just massively, massively outperforms what's expected. And here's the craziest part. A really detailed study found that standard XG models, they actually get it wrong with Messi because he's such an outlier that he literally breaks the data. The models underestimate his real ability by 17%. The big takeaway here? He's even better than the stats say he is. So even though he had achieved everything you could possibly imagine at the club level, there was one massive prize that was always just out of reach. And it created this really painful conflict for his whole career. With Barcelona, he was a god, no question. But for his home country of Argentina, he was haunted by failure.
losing the 2014 World Cup final in the most heartbreaking way possible. He was even booed by his own fans, who started to question if he was more Spanish than Argentinian. The pressure was just immense. And after losing yet another major final in 2016, a completely dejected Messi announced he was retiring from the national team. It really felt like that dream was dead and buried.
But he came back. He couldn't stay away. And in 2021, the tide finally started to turn. Argentina won the Copa America, his first major international trophy. It was like a dam had finally broken.
All of this, the heartbreak, the comeback, that first taste of international glory, it all set the stage for one final career-defining tournament, the 2022 World Cup.
In what so many people have called the greatest World Cup final of all time, Messi's story reached its perfect, dramatic climax. After this insane 3-3 draw, Argentina won it all on penalties.
After decades of pressure, of falling short, of all the heartbreak, the little boy from Rosario had finally done it. He had his crowning moment. As many people said, he had finally completed football. And Messi's story, it really leaves us with this big question, doesn't it? What truly defines greatness? Is it just the list of trophies somebody wins, or is it about the impossible journey they took to get there? Maybe, just maybe, the real prize was the quest itself.